This is Peter Bogdanovich. I first met Orson Wells toward the end of 1968, and not long after we met, in late January 1969, we began taping our conversations for a book about his career that he hoped would set the record straight. We started in his bungalow at the Beverly Hills Hotel, then resumed a couple of weeks later in Guaymas, Mexico, where Orson was acting in the movie of Catch-22. Later that year, we had other talks back at the Beverly Hills Hotel and then at the Beverly Wilshire, and in 1970, we recorded our conversations at the Plaza Hotel in New York, and later at the Hotel Eden in Rome, Italy, and then back in Los Angeles and New York again, and later in Carefree, Arizona. One of our earliest interviews was about Orson's first years in Hollywood and the first picture he planned to make there, based on the Joseph Conrad novel Heart of Darkness, which he had done as a memorable radio show. He never did make the picture.
Did the beard that you grew, this is a legend, the beard that you grew for Heart of Darkness, really have a bad effect on people in Hollywood?
Very bad, but I didn't grow it for them. I'd been wearing it in my tab version of the Green Goddess in vaudeville. And I came to Hollywood with it still on. It wasn't grown for Heart of Darkness. And I planned to shave it off, and I saw how angry they all were about it. I kept it on. It's as simple as that.
Simple perversity, yeah.
No, because
So stupid.
Ward Bond wanted to cut my necktie off and all that because I had a beard, and so, the temptation was too great. I hated having the beard, but with all those kind of characters.
Didn't like it.
He didn't like it. It seemed to indicate it to keep it on.
Yeah. And that was really...
Wasn't for Heart of Darkness. I knew perfectly well Heart of Darkness was going to take months to get ready. I could have grown that beard much later. It was just literally left over from the vaudeville tour.
And was it true that...
I thought it might make me look a little older. I was such a baby-faced fella, and I thought when I came they wouldn't mind me so much if I looked a little older with a beard. Instead, it irritated them when I found that out.
Kept it on.
Yeah, I kept it on just to irritate people like Ward Bond, who wouldn't want to irritate Ward Bond.
What about the... is it true that your first party was boycotted?
I never gave a party
Well,
for 2 or 3 years, no. No, I know where that story comes from. I remember it was my Christmas party for the Mercury, for all my people. And I gave them all presents I had under the tree, and I'd just been divorced, and I was living alone there with my daughter in this big house in Beverly Hills, and I had all these packages, and everybody came in and took their Christmas presents away. And I woke up Christmas morning, and there was nothing under the tree, because nobody had given me anything. That's where the boycotted comes from. Nobody stayed away. It was just
they took what they wanted.
Yes, that's it. It was just a joke story like that. No, nobody ever stayed. People were terribly nice to me in Hollywood, really.
They were, when you
very nice. There was a big gang of people I never got to know who carried on about me and wrote things and all that, but they weren't people I ever met.
Mm-hmm.
People I met were wonderful to me, including the old dinosaur producers and everything. It's not true. I was bad.
And how about the older directors?
Marvelous. They were the nicest of all to me, the ones I met. As I told you, I never met, what's his name? McCary. But everybody was, I can't complain. All that thing about badly treated isn't true at all. I never uttered a word of complaint or had any reason to.
The people who say that, Citizen Kane is a result of Greg Toland is kind of nonsense, because all your pictures look the same, and you only worked with him once. I mean, they all have the same signature anyway, and visually. So,
Well, he was a superb cameraman, and he was, how I happened to use him. He came to my office. It was then the #1 cameraman in the world, and he was just sitting out in my office. And I said, who are you? And he said, my name is Greg Toland, and I want you to use me in your picture. And I said, why? He said, well, because I saw some of your plays in New York, and I want to make a picture with somebody who never made a movie. He said, who did the lighting in your pictures and their plays? And I said, I did. He said, well, fine. Now, because he said that, I believed that it was then definite in my mind that the lighting was done by the director. Because it never occurred to me that it wouldn't be. So for the first 10 days of Citizen Kane, I moved the lights around and gave the orders. Yeah. And behind me, without my knowing it, Toland was balancing it, telling everybody to shut up. And he got very angry when somebody finally came to me and said, you know, that's supposed to be Mr. Toland doing that.
Oh, that's the most fascinating I ever heard.
Yeah.
He was protecting you.
He was protecting me, so he was fixing it so it would work on film.
Yeah.
But I was placing the lights, and he said it's the only way to learn anything is from somebody who's never made movies. That's why I made the picture. And he was also the fastest cameraman I've ever worked with, and used less lights. They're just the young European directors, the cameramen are beginning to work the way he did automatically. He had this extraordinary crew, his own men, who you never heard a sound on a Toland set, you know, except made by actors and directors. There was never a voice raised, there were only signs given. Almost Germanic. It was so hushed. Everybody wore neckties.
The crew.
The crew, yes. And I became closer to Ford during Kane because Toland talked about him all the time and loved Ford very much. And I used extras who were Ford extras.
Who talked about him?
Yes. And then after the picture was released, I got a beer bottle label which had been signed by Ford and all of his people on some drunken boat trip, which was a dedication to me, a kind of award for the picture. And I still hadn't met it.
Marvelous.
Yeah.
When did you meet him?
And a little after that, a little after I received that. And never got to know him very well. I only got to see a lot of him when he was offering me The Last Hurrah.
Yeah, which you told me about.
Yes.
It didn't work out.
It didn't work out, but no fault of his or mine. It was just a foolish accident.
Oh, yes, you told me
Yeah.
that. That would have been a great...
Would have been wonderful to have worked with him. Well, I wish I could have been it. And he came on the set of Touch of Evil many times. Talk about it.
Now, about Toland, how did you then, what was he like to work with? How did you work with him?
Marvelous, because...
once you were told that it was his job, what happened?
Then he went on asking me, you know, trying to get me, and of course I was much more hesitant after that, naturally, because I felt I'd stepped on his feet, but it was the opposite. He was really enjoying it. And then I began to ask a great many of the kind of, you know, depth, all those kind of things, those, depth of focus things. We made up a word, you know, pan focus for a publicity word. And for many years it kept turning up in highbrow articles, and there is no such thing. We just made it up, you know.
Well, there was...
came from the fact that I would just sit and say, I bet you can do this. And he had promised me that he was not going to say anything couldn't be done. And so, of course, the greatest gift a young director could ever have is a cameraman who would do anything you asked. And if it had to be split screen, it was split screen. But we did it. There was never anything I thought up that he said couldn't be done.
In our next exchange, when Orson talks about direction, he means screen direction, a very odd-seeming rule based on the problems of a two-dimensional medium. For example, to show a figure going from left to right on the screen, the camera must always remain on that figure's right-hand side. By moving the camera to the left-hand side, although in fact the figure may still be going in the exact same direction as before, he will appear on the screen to have changed direction and to be going from right to left. This basic fact often requires complicated applications and always takes a little getting used to.
There was just one terrible moment about the third day when I found out about directions, and I couldn't understand that. We had to stop for 3 hours because I couldn't understand why if he went off that direction he had to come in from another, you know. Now I'm the master of it. I'm hateful. I know better than the script girl or anybody. I've got it absolutely mastered, never wrong. But I couldn't. It just had to come to a dead stop. And I just gave up. I said, I can't direct movies. If you're right, and that really makes sense, then I can never direct a movie.
That's really funny. You know, I think only a director can understand.
Yes.
Somebody who's directed a movie can
Yes.
understand it. It just threw me too. I said, what?
Yes. He wasn't looking that way. Can't make sense.
And Toland he tried to explain it.
Yeah. And wonderful script girl I had on that picture, Molly Kent, who's still around. And she and Greg patiently explained it to me. And I really left for the day. I said, it's just no use. I'll have to go back home and sit and think about it because I can't go on like this doing something that doesn't make any sense just because you tell me it does. He was the greatest gift a director could ever have had because, as I say, anything was possible. And he never tried to impress me with the fact that he was doing impossible things, and he was. See, I was calling for things which only an ignorant person could call for, and he was doing them in a way that only a genius could. But without coming on as a wonder worker, he never tried to impress me that he was doing anything miraculous. And his point, which he made, he said, you know, there's nothing to it. He said, you were lighting the set, and you can also be a cameraman. And on one weekend, he says, I'll teach you everything. So we spent a weekend, and he taught me everything there was to know about the camera. Now, can you imagine a cameraman admitting that that can all be taught in a weekend? That was how big a fellow he was, you know, near the camera. And I only found out what he was like when the picture was over and we traveled around. I was going to make a modern dress.
Caesar?
Said, no, Jesus Christ, going to make the gospel.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, and Toland and Perry Ferguson, my art director, and I went on a tour of the same part of Mexico where I'm going now to do Catch-22 to look for locations. It's going to be not modern dress, it's going to be 1890, like with the scribes and Pharisees are kind of Puritans, and there's a kind of Western, but with the words from the Bible. And we went on
the
this
story of Christ.
But every word from the Bible, no original dialogue.
I never heard of that project.
And that went on for some time.
What was the name of that project? Do you remember?
It's going to be the Life of Christ, or whatever you want to call it. I don't think we ever got a title. I finally managed to clear it with Fulton Sheen, so it was all right. And we had a Catholic contingent in RKO, very strong one. And when Fulton Sheen said that it was going to be great, and he was all for it, then it was go ahead.
Was this for RKO?
Yeah.
And why didn't that work out?
Well, it was going to be done after Ambersons.
Oh, I see.
Then I did Ambersons, always planning to do this in the next year because I wanted to do it with Toland. Then he went into the Navy. And I was still going to do it, but of course when I was down in South America, I was fired out of RKO, and that was the end of that.
You said before that you used to sit on the set and just say, I bet you can't do so-and-so to Toland.
Yeah, it's not exactly bet you can. I'd say, let's do that, you know. And instead of his saying, as any other cameraman in the world would, you can't, or if you can, we're going to break ground never broken before, he just went ahead and did it, shooting very fast.
And what kind of things would you specifically, what kind of things would you ask for? Can you give me an example?
Well, all those kind of impossible shots, you know, that don't seem impossible anymore, but in those days they were, you know, where you could see, or you just held focus mainly, things like that.
And why did you want it?
Well, because it seemed to me unreasonable that you wouldn't